Chapter 11 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them by Hereward Carrington. Chapter 11. Color and its Interpretation. In the last chapter we learned that there is a psychic atmosphere or aura surrounding each animate object, and particularly human beings, and that both the structure and the color of this varies greatly. We must now inquire first into the nature of these colorings, and secondly try to solve the question, what do they mean? How are we to interpret these colors, realizing that they are but symbols of something which they merely express? The color of every individual is doubtless somewhat different, and with the same individual it differs at various times, according to his state of health, the mental and psychical changes, etc. The majority of highly developed clairvoyants agree, however, with C.W. Leadbeater that the following colors may be distinguished, and that they signify the existing physical, mental, and spiritual conditions as follows. The meaning of various colors. Black indicates hatred and malice. Anger and hate thought forms are like heavy smoke. Red. Deep red flashes on black ground show anger. Lurid red indicates sensuality. Brown. Dull brown red shows avarice. Dull, hard brown gray, selfishness. Greenish brown, with red or scarlet flashes, denotes jealousy. Gray. Heavy leaden shows deep depression. Livid gray shows fear. Crimson indicates love. Orange, pride or ambition. Yellow shows intellectuality. Duller tints show it is used for selfish purposes. Green. Deep blue-green shows good qualities, deep sympathy, while gray-green shows deceit and cunning. Blue. Dark indicates religious feeling. Light blue shows devotion to a noble spiritual ideal. White or near white shows high spirituality. Dull brown and blue show selfish religious feeling. Dull yellow, low type intellect. Apricot shows pride. Brick red indicates selfish affection and avarice. Light and bright red show pure affection. Grayish green with reddish tinge shows deceit. The health aura is clearly visible to the clairvoyant as a mass of faintly luminous violet-gray mist, interpenetrating the denser part of the human body and extending very slightly beyond. It is easy to understand how almost infinite may be the combinations and modifications of all these hues, so that the most delicate graduation of character, or the most evanescent of mingled feelings, may be expressed with the greatest accuracy. Many of the colors are unknown to our physical faculties, so that it is impossible to picture them with psychic hues. When a clairvoyant sees these colors in the aura or surroundings of an individual, therefore, he may feel that the characteristica indicated are present, and the same thing is true when they are to be seen in the surroundings of a returning spirit. The 7 auras surrounding man. When the advanced student carefully studies the human aura, he will find that there are a number of straight, white, very fine lines emanating from the body, and particularly the head, which resemble rays of white light. These are magnetic rays, which do not deal directly with the psychical condition of the subject. The innermost aura will be found to consist of 5 different colored bands. The first will be pure white, the second light blue, the third darker blue, the fourth lemon yellow, the fifth dark red. The second layer of the aura will be found to be bluish violet merging into rose. Those two interpenetrate one another, forming very beautiful combinations. The third layer consists of 3 cloudy zones, the first pink, the second violet, and the third orange. The fourth layer consists of green cloud-like waves tinged with yellow, resembling the golden edges of clouds behind which the sun is shining. The fifth will be seen to be slate or indigo in color with silver edges. The sixth will consist of a beautiful light blue, with a whitish golden fringe. The 7th or outermost aura will be seen to be a grayish mist of a light violet tint. The outer aura completes the auric emanation of man, and is the outer shell, as it were, consisting of the so-called auric egg surrounding every human being, of which more will be said later. Changes in the colors. When a golden yellow light is seen about the head, it may be assumed that such an individual has great intellectuality combined with spirituality, and in some cases it has been said that this contains a cloud of gold dust, each speck revolving spirally on itself. These colours of various auras are not unchanging, as before said, so that the student must not expect to see them exactly as described. They are greatly modified by the mental and psychical condition of the subject, and the thoughts and emotions which the latter may be experiencing at the time of observation will also affect the aura. The colours of thoughts. Thus fear gives rise to circles of bright rings, spread out in the form of a cone, of varying shades of grey, pink, and purple. A beautiful devotional thought may be expressed in the form of a star of bluish mist tinged with yellow. Pity may be seen as a reddish-violet cloud, from which issue pointed cones of a brighter pink. Deception will give rise to a steel-blue mist, tinged with pink and taking the shape of any regular spiral. Fear may give rise to balls of grey, pink, and yellow mist, while fear combined with anger will give forth a blackish-grey mist, from which red electrical flashes appear to issue. The auric egg. These colours extend over the whole of the auric egg, and may be seen by the clairvoyant to be influencing it throughout. The auric egg, which is formed round an individual by the atmosphere or aura emanating from him, extends both above and below his body, as well as sideways, and is from 9 to 10 feet in height, and 5 feet in diameter. If the colour of this auric egg be examined by a clairvoyant, characteristics of the individual may be clearly defined after the necessary practice and development, and the general character of the subject may be in this way discovered and interpreted. The colours of various individuals. Of course, it is necessary to make a long study of the aura and to attain a good deal of psychic development before all the details contained in this chapter can be discovered by the student in actual practice. Assuming, however, that you have progressed sufficiently in your studies to be enabled to see the aura of any individual, you may proceed to examine the whole auric egg with its varied colours. If you do this, you will find them to be about as follows. A highly developed individual will have a haze of golden light, issuing from the head and extending almost to the top of the egg. Above this will be a faint purplish light. On either side of this golden aura, and issuing upwards and outwards from the shoulders, will be a bluish light which merges into pink as it descends to the breast. From that point to the thighs a pinkish light may be seen, light in some cases, darkish red in others. About the knees this pink shades off into a delicate green, and this green covers the feet and extends downward almost to the lower margin of the auric egg, where it becomes a darkish blue. With less highly developed individuals these colours will vary according to the table given above. In some cases the auric egg will be composed almost entirely of greys, greens, and browns. Primary colours and their meanings. In general, it may be said that yellow and any bright clear colours, when seen in the aura of an individual, denote strong vitality and active intellectuality. Lilac, blue, and violet have to do with spiritual characteristics. They are associated with simple, unselfish natures, and with those having spiritual aspirations. Red is directly connected with passions, and particularly anger. Blue is associated with religious feeling, though if too muddy it denotes selfishness. The brighter and clearer the colours the better, and they should be as clear-cut as possible. Colours shown by spirits or seen clairvoyantly. These colours are not always associated with the human aura or with any human form. They are often seen by psychics who are developing themselves as cloud-like masses or shapes, which form more or less distinctly in front of them, and appear to take the outline of flowers, flashes, etc. Colours are occasionally seen in dreams, but the dream images of most people are colourless, or only light grey, like a shadow. They are in fact such stuff as dreams are made of. In general, these colours may be interpreted according to the laws given above, but the precise interpretation of these symbolic messages is a more difficult question to settle. A spirit, who may be trying to communicate and to give a certain message to a medium, may apply this same method of colour symbolism to convey his meaning, but this is often confusing to the psychic and difficult to interpret. We shall come to this question, however, in the next chapter, which is devoted to symbolism. End of Chapter 11.
Chapter 12 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them by Hereward Carrington. Chapter 12. Symbolism. Symbolism is one of the most important and, at the same time, one of the least understood subjects in the whole realm of psychics and spiritualism. A proper understanding of what it means, and the adequate interpretation of symbols as presented to the psychic, would prove of great value to every student, and to all those who are undertaking their own psychic development. What symbolism means. First of all, it is necessary that you should understand exactly what symbolism means. A symbol is a sign for something else, which it expresses in a more or less partial and incomplete manner. Usually, a symbol is a sign which appeals to one of the five senses, but denotes not a sensual thing, but the thought lying behind it. Thus, the printed word on the page is the symbol of the author's thought, expressed in that word. The poem is the expression of the poet's mind and spirit, as set forth in the words and meter of the poem, etc. Thus, symbols are always only partial and incomplete, and represent but a small fraction of the thing they stand for, and we should always be in error if we tried to reconstruct the whole of the thing symbolized from what we perceive by means of our senses. Before we proceed to the subject of symbolism as studied in psychics and the phenomena of spiritualism, one other point should be explained. We never see an object in the physical world as it really is. Symbolized objects. We only perceive or realize through our five senses various aspects or qualities of the object. Thus, if you are looking at an orange, your sense of sight gives you the impression of a reddish-yellow sphere, rather irregular on its surface. Your sense of touch tells you that this thing is round, that it is somewhat rough and cool. Your sense of smell supplies you with the information that it has a pleasant odor unlike anything else, which is confirmed by your taste. In this particular instance, the sense of hearing does not enter into the question, as it would in many other instances. Now, all these things which appeal to our senses, color, odor, texture, etc., are qualities of the orange and not the orange itself. The orange is always something different from all of these, above and beyond them, and is more inclusive than any of these qualities and symbols. Thus, suppose you took away one of those symbols, its color. The orange would immediately become invisible to you, yet it would continue to exist, though we could never know of its existence. This shows us clearly that symbols are very inadequate and imperfect representations of a vaster something lying behind them, and they represent only a small fraction of the totality of the thing as it really exists. Symbolism of spirit. As applied to the spirit of man, we must begin by admitting the rather startling fact that no man has ever seen it. No man has ever seen another. All he has ever seen are the outward features, the form, the facial expressions of the other. And when our spirits hold communication with one another in this world, they do so by written symbols, by motions of the hands or head, or by means of air waves passing from the throat of one to the ear of the other. All but expressions or symbols, which are interpreted by us according to a certain prearranged code. If we did not have this prearranged code, it would be impossible for two intelligent beings to converse with one another, as may readily be seen when a Chinaman and an American meet for the first time, neither of them speaking the language of the other. They try as best they can to make each other understand what they are thinking about, what thoughts are in their minds, but they succeed very imperfectly, or not at all. The symbols employed are too inadequate to express their thoughts. Symbolism in spirit communication. Now, all these difficulties we encounter when a spirit endeavors to communicate with us through a medium or directly. It can express itself, as a rule, only very imperfectly, as will be explained in a later chapter, and must resort largely to symbols to convey its meaning. Hence, we should be very mistaken if we were to interpret this symbolism literally, or to assume that it represented the whole of the subject matter which the spirit desired to convey. As I said in my book, The Problems of Psychical Research, Our dreams, as we know, are largely symbolic, the work of Freud and others having proved this beyond all doubt. It is highly probable that the ravings of delirium are also of this nature, though no one, so far as I know, has yet devoted to their study the attention they deserve. Certainly it is true in mediumistic phenomena, for in trance conditions a large number of the messages, tests, and visions seen are of this nature and character, the symbolism being often so elaborate that the original thought is not perceived. Why this symbolism? The probable answer to this question is that the message cannot be given directly, and that this symbolic method of presentation must be resorted to in order to get the message through at all. There is good evidence to show that a pictorial method is resorted to very largely by the spirits, mediums seeing what they describe very often when the more direct auditory method is not resorted to. The spirit presents somehow to the mind of the medium a picture, which is described and often interpreted by the medium. Often this interpretation is quite erroneous, resembling a defective analysis of a dream. Because of this, the message is not recognized, yet the source of the message may have been perfectly veridical, truth-telling. Let me illustrate this more fully. Suppose you desire to tell a Chinaman who speaks not a word of English to fetch a certain object from the next room. It would be useless for you to say the word watch because he would not know what the word meant. Probably you would tap your waistcoat pocket, pretend to take out a watch, wind it, look at the hands, etc., in your endeavor to convey to him your meaning. If this were not recognized for any reason, you would have the utmost difficulty in conveying your meaning to him, and equal difficulty in telling him to fetch the watch from the next room. Now, supposing these antics, or somewhat similar ones, were resorted to by a spirit in his attempt to convey the word watch, perhaps to remind the sitter of a particular watch he used to wear. The spirit might well proceed as follows. He taps his stomach and looks at a spot over his left side. He seems to wish to convey the impression that he has suffered much from bowel trouble, perhaps a cancer on the left side. Yes, he seems to be taking something away from his body. Evidently they removed some growth, and he wishes to convey the idea that something was taken from him. Now he is examining his hand. He is looking intently. Now he is doing something with his fingers. I can't see what it is, a little movement. Was he connected with machinery in life? Now he is pointing to the door, etc. The interpretation of symbols. Such an interpretation of the facts, it will be observed, while describing his actions, is wholly misleading as to its interpretation. The symbolism has been wholly misconstrued, and inasmuch as the subject probably never died of cancer, had no bowel trouble, underwent no operation, and was never connected with machinery, it is highly probable that the message would be put down wholly to the medium's subconscious imagination, or even to guessing or conscious fraud. Yet, it will be observed, the message was in its inception wholly veridical, the fault lying in the symbolism misinterpreted by the medium. There is evidence to show that other forms of symbolism are adopted also, applying to the auditory as well as to the visual presentation of images. It is well known that names are very difficult to obtain by mediums, and this is probably due to the fact that names are not pictures or visual symbols, and in themselves mean nothing as a rule. They are merely a combination of letters having a certain sound. The forms of symbolism. It is generally easier for the spirit to impress a partially developed psychic by means of a picture than in any other way, and for this reason names are difficult to get. Still, in many cases names are obtained by a picture shown. Thus, the name Merrifield was in one case given to the psychic as a picture of a number of children happily playing in a green field. Among other forms of symbolism are the following. A large key may be shown to the psychic. This may not mean a key at all, but a symbol of success, the key being the means by which the door of prosperity is opened. Colors are frequently shown, and nearly all colors are symbolic of something or other and have their definite meaning, as we saw in the last chapter. Strange, weird, and horrible figures do not necessarily mean anything bad or anything evil. They may be symbolic of something entirely different, and this is frequently seen in dreams, which are composed almost entirely of symbols throughout. Most psychics, when they are developing, see peculiar specks, clouds, and forms shaping themselves before them in space. They are naturally at a loss to interpret and explain these images. While there is much latitude of interpretation, always in symbolism, the following simple suggestions based on traditional teachings may be found helpful. Clouds and lights. Clouds, if white, may be interpreted as signifying happiness and prosperity, either to the psychic or to one near and dear to them. If these seem to recede rapidly and fade away in the distance, a journey is often indicated. If the clouds appear to be advancing toward you, it indicates that news will shortly reach you. Good if the clouds are white, bad if they are dark. If red and lurid, ill fortune is upon your horizon, for which you must be on constant guard. Black clouds symbolize troubles of the heart. Tiny moving speeds of light, if they truly result from psychic development, are said to introduce that you are progressing favorably in your psychic sensitiveness. If these specks are dark, however, evil or harmful influences may be about you, for which you must be on a constant lookout. A light within a light is said to symbolize the presence of some spirit, desirous of communicating. Should such a sign appear to you, try at once to enter into communication with the spirit intelligence by asking questions, and note whether the light you see endeavors to reply to you by means of some simple code. Reptiles and other unpleasant signs usually symbolize the hidden fears of the psychic. They are symbolized in this way, externalizing the subconscious fear thought of the subject. Root out your hidden fear and apprehension, assert your mastery and fearlessness, and the unpleasant sign will always disappear. The subconscious and symbols. The subconscious mind has the faculty of describing in symbolic form thoughts, impressions, or influences which come to it, either through the senses or more directly by telepathic or clairvoyant visions or messages which are said to be given through it by the spirits. The spirit may convey a certain message to the subconscious mind of the psychic, and the message may be externalized or presented to the ordinary conscious mind in symbolic form, representing, apparently, something entirely different from the original message. It is in the interpretation of these symbols that much of the true art of mediumship and psychic development will be found to lie. The better the medium, the more expert in the interpretation of these symbols. At present, no general rule can be laid down as to the interpretation of the symbols employed, since these will differ very largely in every case, each medium having his own method of interpretation and his own form of symbolism. You must learn for yourself, by repeated experience, what the various symbols mean to you, and thus form a code or method of interpretation, which you can always follow throughout your future development. A close study of symbolism will yield you very important practical results, as well as being of great interest in itself. End of Chapter 12.
Chapter 13 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them by Hereward Carrington. Chapter 13. Telepathy. Telepathy, mind reading, thought transference, are all terms meaning very much the same thing, namely, the ability to impress the mind of another person with a definite thought or thoughts, without traveling through the usual avenues of sense. The word telepathy was coined by Mr. F. W. H. Myers in 1882, and is derived from two Greek words, tele, at a distance, and pathos, feeling, and means literally sensing at a distance. From this, it has come to mean thought reading, in general, as we now understand it. How telepathy operates. How telepathy takes place we cannot yet say with certainty. Some scientific men, such as Sir William Crookes, are inclined to believe that vibrations in the ether travel from brain to brain, very much like the messages in wireless telegraphy. Others, on the contrary, contend that this explanation is insufficient and that we have no proof that such brain waves exist. As Mr. Myers expressed it, life has the power of manifesting itself to life, and this is as far as we can go as yet by way of scientific explanation of the facts. It is almost certainly true that telepathy takes place not between the conscious minds of two individuals, but by way of the subconscious, that vast field which we described in Chapter 4, the subconscious. So that if a message is sent from one conscious mind to another, it would travel in rather a roundabout fashion as follows: from the conscious to the subconscious mind of A, from that to the subconscious mind of B, and from the subconscious mind to the conscious mind of B. In B, the process by which it was conveyed from the subconscious to the ordinary mind would be that of externalization, so frequently seen in dreams, crystal gazing, and other phenomena. This fully explains to us why it is that we frequently receive telepathic messages at the moment we are falling to sleep, or at least appear to do so. We may have received the message an hour or two before this, but its externalization was impossible until the ordinary consciousness ceased to be so active with the affairs of the day. And then the subconscious mind had a chance to deliver its message, received some time before from some distant mind. The various kinds of telepathic messages. Telepathic messages may be visual, in which case they take the form of pictures, figures, written or printed words, etc. They may be auditory, in which case they take the form of spoken words. They may be emotional, in which case the subject may feel a particular depression or excitement. They may be volitional, in which case the subject is seized with the imperative desire to perform a certain action, etc. Telepathic messages may originate either in the living or in the dead. As they are transmitted from the subconscious mind, perhaps under the supervision and direction of the conscious mind, they are often transmitted most effectually during sleep, trance, under the influence of some drug, in delirium, at the moment of death, etc. These messages are most easily received at such times when the conscious mind is asleep or in abeyance, and for this reason we have so-called visions of the dying, ecstasy, trance-speaking, and revelation, etc. Telepathy from spirits. It is probably true that spirits converse with one another directly by means of telepathy, though they understand fully the thought of the other as though the sentence had been fully spoken. Swedenborg tells us that this is the case, and that the telepathic thoughts sent out by a spirit appear to other spirits or to mediums in trance as clear and sonorous as spoken words. If spirits in the flesh can converse at times with one another by means of telepathy, and if disembodied spirits converse with one another by this means, it is only natural to suppose that this is frequently the method of communication resorted to between embodied and disembodied spirits, and all trance mediums know that this is in fact the case. The larger meanings and applications of telepathy will be discussed more fully in the chapter devoted to prayer, etc. Practical experiments in telepathy. The following practical exercises will enable you to prove to your own satisfaction that telepathy exists, and that it can be reduced to a more or less simple process by continual practice. Select a friend with whom you are in sympathy, physically, mentally, and morally. One of you must be the sender or transmitter, the other the receiver or recipient. Let us suppose for a moment that you are the transmitter. The recipient should be seated in a comfortable chair at one end of a fairly large room, which must be freely ventilated. It is best that, at least during the early experiments, he should be blindfolded, or that he close his eyes or sit with his back to you, pencil in hand and pad on knee. He should sit in a semi-darkened part of the room. For your part, you should sit at a table, facing him, that is his back, with a pad of paper and pencil before you. Have a bright light thrown on the pad of paper, leaving the rest of the room in semi-darkness. Now draw upon the paper a symbol, perhaps a geometric figure, such as a triangle, circle, square, etc. Look at this figure intently, and endeavor to impress it on the recipient. You should not make each trial exceed 1 minute in length. How to ensure success? The attitude of mind which you hold during these experiments is very important. You should will that your recipient should see the picture presented to him, yet you should not strain yourself in the attempt, and wrinkling your brows, tensing the muscles, etc. will not add to the certainty with which your picture is conveyed, rather the reverse. On the other hand, you should have complete confidence in the fact that he will get the impression you are sending him. Never allow yourself for a moment to believe that you will fail. Say to yourself that he has already succeeded in receiving it. Do not allow yourself to become flustered or worried or anxious. Imagine your thoughts traveling to him in a definite form, either in the shape of the object itself or in the word, square, circle, etc. Though in that case you must be careful that you do not unconsciously whisper the word so that he hears it. The recipient on his part should make his mind as blank as possible and note down any pictures or impressions that come to him, no matter how wild they may appear. Above all, you must not be discouraged by early non-successes, for these you must expect. More complicated experiments. After you have succeeded with the diagrams, you may try more complicated pictures, such as playing cards, which are very good for this purpose, as the deck may be shuffled between each draw, and it is easy to calculate the percentage of guesses, since chance would always be 51 to 1 against the subject hitting upon the correct card by accident. After these experiments, you may try some in the transference of pain. Prick yourself lightly in various parts of the body with a sharp needle, or pinch yourself and see whether the subject can locate the pain correctly on himself. If he is a good subject, he will do so in very many instances, as though the pain were transferred directly to him and you were pricking or pinching him. Next, you may try a number of experiments in smell and taste. Procure a number of substances, such as cloves, nutmeg, pepper, sugar, etc., and smell or taste these in turn, being careful that you are far enough removed from your subject to prevent him from smelling these in the usual way. Many good subjects can tell immediately the substance you are putting into your mouth the instant you placed it there. After you have succeeded this far, you should try to increase the distance between you until you can perform the same feats though miles apart. How to prevent evil influences from affecting you. These simple experiments will prove to you and to the skeptic the existence of telepathy. They will render you more sensitive to the reception of messages from distant living minds, and also messages from the discarnate. In this way you will cultivate your sensitiveness to messages of this character, and this will be beneficial to you, provided that you do not carry these practices too far and cultivate your sensitiveness unduly in wrong directions. Under normal, healthy conditions, your mind will not be affected by impressions of this character, since it will be most difficult for you to receive them, as a rule, no matter how hard you may try. The mind always protects itself against too easy access by outside minds. It is very rare indeed that subjects are impressed against their will. Some persons, it is true, believe that others at a distance are influencing them in this manner, and impressing them to do certain things. Many believe that they are hypnotized, etc. But in nearly all cases, these beliefs are illusory. They have no foundation in fact. When examined, they are found to rest wholly in the imagination of the subject, and they are frequently but the indications of an unbalanced mind. This does not mean that such persons are necessarily insane, but they would become so were they to dwell upon their imagined grievance long enough, and believe in it after they have been shown repeatedly that such was not the true case. It is this persistent will to believe in a thing which is not true that is one of the causes of insanity. The student who practices telepathy within reason, and who has followed the instructions contained in the early chapters of this book as regards fortifying and protecting his own inner nature, need have no fear that telepathic influences or impressions from others will ever affect him against his own will. In nearly all cases, these so-called influences are imaginary. And even should they exist, the subject, who has mustered himself and who has strengthened his soul from within, is capable of overcoming and repulsing any outside forces of this character, and of preventing any telepathic influence ever reaching him, no matter whether it comes from the living or from the dead. End of Chapter 13.
Chapter 14 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them by Hereward Carrington. Chapter 14. Clairvoyance. Clairvoyance is derived from two French words and means literally clear seeing. It means far more, however, in the language of spiritualism and psychics, and is now used to cover and classify, if not to explain, a large number of different phenomena, which someday will probably be explained in other ways. There are various types and kinds of clairvoyance, different authorities having given somewhat different definitions of the various subdivisions. Thus, the Manual of the National Spiritualists' Association subdivides and defines the various types of clairvoyance as follows. Subjective clairvoyance. 1. Subjective clairvoyance is that psychic condition of a human being, who thereby becomes a medium, which enables spirit intelligences, through the manipulation of the nerve centers of sight, to impress or photograph upon the brain of the medium pictures and images which are seen as visions by the medium without the aid of the physical eye. These pictures and images may be of things, spiritual or material, past or present, remote or near, hidden or uncovered, or they may have their existence simply in the conception or imagination of the medium communicating them. Objective clairvoyance. 2. Objective clairvoyance is that psychic power or function of seeing objectively spiritual beings, objects, and things by and through the spiritual sensorium which pervades the physical mechanism of vision, without which objective clairvoyance would be impossible. But few persons are born with this power. In some it is developed, and in others it has but a casual quickening. Its extent is governed by the rate of vibration under which it operates. Thus, one clairvoyant may see objectively spiritual things which to another may be invisible, because of the degree of difference in the intensity of the power. X-ray clairvoyance. 3. X-ray clairvoyance is a form of clairvoyance which partakes of the characteristics of the X-ray and seems to be objective. The clairvoyant who possesses this power is able to see physical objects through intervening physical matter, can perceive the internal parts of the human body, diagnose disease, and observe the operations of healing and decay. Cataleptic clairvoyance. 4. Cataleptic clairvoyance occurs when the body is in a trance state resembling sleep, induced by hypnotic power, exercised by an incarnate or decarnate spirit, or it may be self-induced. When in this state the spirit leaves the body and is able, at its own will or the suggestion of the hypnotist, to travel to remote places and to see clearly what is transpiring in the places it visits, and to observe spiritual as well as material things in its environment. While in this state, it sometimes happens that the thoughts of the spirit in its travels are expressed by the lips of the physical body, and that thought images are conveyed to it through the physical body. This is due to the fact that there is a spirit cord which connects the body and the spirit and transmits vibrations between them. As long as this cord is not severed, the spirit can return to the body, but should it be severed, then what we call death would at once ensue. Under this form of clairvoyance, there is an interblending of subjective and objective spiritual sight. Trance-control clairvoyance. 5. Trance-control clairvoyance is that psychic state under which the control of the physical body of the medium is assumed by a spirit intelligence, and the consciousness of the medium is, for the time being, dethroned. In this case, the controlling spirit is really the clairvoyant, and simply uses the medium's body as a means of communicating what the spirit sees, and therefore the question of subjective and objective spiritual sight, insofar as the medium is concerned, cannot be raised. To some persons who go to mediums for readings and who may become witnesses in trials at law, it may not be known that under trance control, the medium is to all intents and purposes absent. Therefore, in dealing with definitions of clairvoyance to be used for the enlightenment of thinking people, judges, and juries, it seems necessary for the protection of such mediums to explain what is here termed trance control clairvoyance. Telepathic clairvoyance, etc. 6. Telepathic clairvoyance is the subjective perception in picture form of thought transmitted from a distance. The type of clairvoyance illustrated in Class 4 is frequently called traveling clairvoyance, because the spirit appears to travel, after leaving its body, and visit distant scenes. According to the above definitions, this type of clairvoyance is classified under definition number 1, but other authorities would give it a separate class by itself. When the psychic's mind seems to travel backward along the stream of time, and remembers events which were beyond its normal recollection, we have cases of so-called retrocognition. When, on the other hand, the psychic's mind seems to travel forward into the future, and sees scenes and events which, of course, he was otherwise unable to foretell, we have cases of prevision, prophecy, and precognition. This latter subject will be dealt with more fully in the chapter devoted to prophecy versus fortune-telling. We also have spontaneous and experimental clairvoyance, these definitions explaining themselves. Then direct and indirect clairvoyance. Direct when no other mind or agency is involved but the psychic's own. Indirect when it goes through a roundabout channel and involves some other mind, incarnate or discarnate. As opposed to telepathic clairvoyance, we have so-called independent clairvoyance. Also, there are cases of reciprocal clairvoyance, in which two persons see one another at the same time and, as it were, exchange their clairvoyant visions. The type of clairvoyance which is characterized by leaving the body and visiting the spiritual spheres, afterwards returning to reanimate the body, is called ecstasy. Mr. Leadbeater divides clairvoyance into 3 subdivisions: clairvoyance in time, clairvoyance in space, and direct clairvoyance, in which the astral or spiritual senses are opened up so as to perceive planes of activity now about us. Dream clairvoyance. Clairvoyance may also occur in dreams, crystal visions, etc., and clairaudience, which corresponds to clairvoyance, save that the information is obtained by means of the ear rather than the eye, may be obtained through shell hearing. In this case, the messages are heard rather than seen. Another technical name for clairvoyance, which is sometimes used, is telesthesia. Clairvoyance may manifest itself in a variety of forms, as the above definitions would signify. The most common form is spontaneous clairvoyance, in which the psychic sees pictures of absent persons and scenes. Clairvoyant dreams are fairly common. Clairvoyant diagnosis. There is a type of mental clairvoyance which enables the subject to see, as it were, into the body of another, diagnosing his disease as though he perceived clearly the conditions present in that individual's body at the time. This form of psychic vision was possessed by Andrew Jackson Davis in a remarkable degree, but is possessed by many psychics of our own day. Another form of clairvoyance is that in which underground metals and waters may sometimes be perceived. Usually in this case, the psychic walks over the ground to be explored with a forked twig or stick in his hands. Suddenly this bends or dips, and where this happens, water or metal is to be found. This is technically known as dowsing, and has been proved to exist as a scientific fact by Sir William F. Barrett, Professor of Physics in the University of Dublin. Of late years, a new and peculiar type of clairvoyance has been developed by Mr. Vincent N. Turvey of London, a friend of Mr. W. T. Stead. He termed this phone-voyance, for the reason that he receives his impressions and intuitions, etc., when he is conversing with a distant friend over the telephone, and then only. This is a form of sensitiveness which could be obtained by many psychics if they developed it. The explanation of clairvoyance. Clairvoyance has been explained in a variety of ways. We may briefly summarize these theories as follows. 1. The astral or spiritual sense theory. This may be stated as follows. Corresponding to each physical sense organ, the eye, ear, etc., there is a corresponding spiritual or astral sense organ. We see physical objects by means of the physical eye and hear them by means of the physical ear. When we see clairvoyantly, on the contrary, we see by means of our spiritual eye, and when we hear clairaudiently, we hear by means of the spiritual or astral ear. These spiritual sense organs function in a spiritual world, and of course serve the spiritual body when we die as our physical organs now serve us, and operate on the spirit plane of activity. If their use is not cultivated in precisely the right direction, it may lead to difficulties for the reason that both the astral and spiritual sight may be used at the same time. They may become mixed up and you may see two worlds at once instead of one, so that you cannot be sure when you go outside the door whether you are going to step on the pavement or into a great ditch, both of which you see equally clearly before you. Many persons have got into this condition, which takes some time to outgrow. 2. The spiritual influence theory. According to this theory, clairvoyance is accomplished not by means of the subject's own unaided powers, but always through the instrumentality of a spirit who sees the distant scenes, etc., and impresses them upon the subject's mind telepathically. Tubes, thought forms, and direct perception. 3. The astral tube theory. According to this view, the clairvoyant constructs a sort of telescope or tube for himself out of astral matter, and through this he looks. The figures, in this case, always appear small and far off. 4. By the creation of a thought form. On this theory, we create a thought form for ourselves in the locality we desire to visit, and utilize it for the purpose of observation. We look out of its eyes, hear with its ears, etc. 5. The direct perception theory. This theory says that outside influences play no part in the phenomena, but that we perceive distant scenes ourselves by means of some process of self-projection. But here we are met with a difficulty that if the psychic is absent, viewing the distant scene, how can he also be present in the room, animating his own body and speaking through it as he undoubtedly does in many cases? Most psychics, when they begin their development, see shapes and figures more frequently than they experience any other phenomena. They wonder why this should be. Why should nearly all of us see? Now and then, it is true, we come across one who hears more easily than sees, but he is the exception, not the rule. Why and how we see in clairvoyance. The explanation of this fact is probably the following. We use our eyes more than we do any other one of our senses. We feel that our active consciousness is more connected with sight than with anything else. The sight centers in the brain are more used than any of the others, and this fact is proved by dreams, in which we see figures but very seldom hear spoken words. Again, our memory consists mostly of visual symbols. If we think of a person, we call up his image before us, this being a memory image. Now, as these parts of the mind and brain are so active, it is only an extension of this faculty of inducing memory images which enables us to see objects and figures in clairvoyance. We only have to force this faculty of the mind a little more than usual to carry it beyond the limitations of physical sense. Whereas with the other senses, much less used, we have to do a great deal more of this cultivating or forcing process in order to develop the corresponding spiritual organs. Clairvoyance and similar faculties depend in many cases upon the partial liberation or freeing of the spirit from the body, and the stimulation of the corresponding psychic sense organs into a higher degree of activity, and so permitting their use. The following are a few exercises which will be found helpful in developing this faculty of clairvoyance according to our methods of development. Developing exercises. 1. Seat yourself in a comfortable chair in a semi-darkened room. Mentally construct, i.e. imagine, before you a tube, open at both ends. One end of this tube fits over your eyes, and the other end extends indefinitely outward into space. Imagine that this tube is hollow and that you can see through it perfectly. Turn this tube in the direction of the house of a friend of yours. Mentally go into a room and see if you can discover in it anyone present, and if so, who he is and what he looks like. Note what you see carefully. You will be able to verify the next day how far your vision is correct. 2. Construct the tube as before. At the other end of this tube, which you should imagine about 100 yards long, you must endeavor to see clairvoyantly the face of a friend. Try to distinguish the features of this face, making them clearer and clearer. When you have done this, gradually pull it toward you by an effort of will, until it is only about 2 or 3 feet distant. It should then be perfectly clear and every feature distinguishable. When you have succeeded in visualizing this face so clearly that you see it as distinctly as you would if that individual stood before you in life, your progress as a clairvoyant will have made great advances, and you may then begin experiments in influencing this person at a distance, while seeing his face before you as explained. Will that he should do a certain thing, to think of you at a certain time, or see your face float before him as he is busy with his daily occupations. If you practice this persistently, you will ultimately achieve success, being able to influence persons without doubt. Polarization and how to use it. This ability to influence a distant person or object by means of your will, when directed toward him, has been termed a polarization, because you polarize a path or channel through the astral atmosphere toward the desired point, and this channel facilitates psychic communication in both directions. A great deal depends, during these experiments, upon your ability to hold the object clearly in your mind's eye, and to concentrate upon it. If you do not do this, your efforts will be lost, since you will find there are a great many astral currents, playing to and fro, which tend to disintegrate your own currents set up by you, and unless these are strong, you will not succeed in overcoming the astral cross-currents. In conducting these experiments, you must be sure, especially at first, always to keep your consciousness centered in your own body, and not to let it go outward into space along with your thought. Your will alone must travel outward. You must keep your consciousness within your own physical body. If you do not do this, you will be apt to get into trouble. Your starting point, your focal center, as it is called, must always be maintained. In developing clairvoyance, you should remember that faith and belief tend to open up your latent powers and faculties, while disbelief has the contrary effect of closing them and shutting off all further development. This is true in all lines of psychic unfoldment. Clairvoyance is a faculty possessed by the whole human race in varying degrees, and there are indications that with each generation its power is becoming greater and greater, so that the time will doubtless come when everyone will see clairvoyantly, just as we now see with our ordinary eyes. In fact, the possession of strong intuition and sentiments, sensing the feelings and emotions of others, etc., are but undeveloped clairvoyant flashes, giving you an insight into the mind of the person with whom you are conversing. Factors in the development of clairvoyance. Concentration is an important factor in the cultivation of clairvoyance. You must train your mind so that you can think of a particular object for several minutes without relaxing or allowing any other thought to enter your consciousness. You must practice gazing at an object until you can do this for 2 or 3 minutes without moving your eyes and without fatigue. You should cultivate deep breathing exercises and, during inspiration, think that you are drawing on the vital energy of the universe, while with each breath you exhale, you are throwing off any adverse influences which may have come to you. Visualizing is an important factor in developing clairvoyance. You should get into the habit of calling up before your mind a face you have seen or a scene you have witnessed that day, trying to remember every detail and making it clearer and clearer until you have every detail clear in your mind's eye. You should then endeavor to project it outward into space, as though you were seeing these pictures outside your head as real entities, and not merely as memory pictures. Crystal gazing, etc., will greatly help in this. How to distinguish true from false. One question which always presents itself to the mind of the student is this: how can I distinguish the true from the false, real clairvoyant visions from memory pictures and hallucinations? It is extremely difficult to do this, particularly for the beginner. and this ability to distinguish comes only with prolonged practice and experience. A lady of my acquaintance has all her life been enabled to distinguish between phantasmal figures of the living and those of the dead. That is, she could tell by looking at the figure whether it represented a living or a dead person. Again, she was always able to tell whether this was a genuine or helpful intelligence, or whether it was an evil or lying one. This ability to distinguish cannot be gained in a day. It must come by practice, and the beginnings of genuine clairvoyance can only be ascertained by experiment and by following up on the visions and figures which appear to one, and see whether they lead to anything definite in the way of progress and enlightenment or not. As to the various symbols and colors which appear to the clairvoyant, these should be interpreted according to the rules laid down in chapters 11 and 12, devoted to these subjects. Clairvoyance and dreams will be discussed in the next chapter. A few words in conclusion as to the theory of clairvoyance. It will be remembered that I enumerated before, pages 117 to 124, the various theories which have been advanced to explain clairvoyance, the astral sense theory, the direct vision theory, etc. Our own view of the matter is that all of the explanations previously proposed are in a sense true. That is, they are all true in particular cases, but that none of them explains all types of clairvoyance. The spirit influence theory is true in some instances, the direct clairvoyance theory is true in others, and the astral sense theory is the correct one in still others, etc. The mystery solved. As to the difficulty which is presented by the fact that a clairvoyant can animate and speak through his own body while he is psychically active elsewhere, this is explained by assuming that only a portion of his total psychic self remains behind, and that the more active spirit part performs the journey or excursion, this part being connected to the physical body by means of a cord or connection which unites it to the latter. This connection is sometimes called the silver thread, and is the channel of communication between the spirit and its body, while the former has gone on its excursion. If this thread were to snap or become broken, death would take place, since the spirit would be unable to return and reanimate the body. Such accidents are extremely rare, but they have been recorded from time to time in the past. In clairvoyance, the connection remains, of course, intact, and communication back and forth between the body and the absent psychic self takes place along this cord or thread. In still other types of clairvoyance, on the other hand, no actual excursion or leaving the body takes place. The active consciousness remains in the body, animating it, while the clairvoyant vision takes place through the psychic telescope or tube before mentioned. In such cases, there is no difficulty in accounting for all we see, but this is not such an advanced type of clairvoyance as the former, in which the psychic self leaves the body and goes on trips and excursions of its own. End of Chapter 14.
Chapter 15 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them, by Hereward Carrington. Dreams. Dreams usually take place during sleep, though there is a peculiar form of imaginative picturing which may occur sometimes during the waking hours, and which we call daydreaming. Of these I shall treat in another place. Speaking first of ordinary dreams, I may begin by pointing out that before we can understand them we must know a little of the nature and phenomena of sleep in which they occur. We all spend about 1/3 of our lives in sleep, so that this is a condition which we should certainly know something about if we possibly can. What is sleep? Various theories have been advanced in the past to explain sleep, but no satisfactory theory has ever been fully accepted. Thus we have the so-called chemical theories, which endeavor to account for sleep by assuming that certain poisonous substances are formed in the body during waking hours and are eliminated during sleep. Others have suggested that sleep is due to peculiar conditions of the circulation of blood in the brain. Still others that the action of certain glands explains sleep. Others that muscular relaxation accounts for it. others that the lack of external stimuli is sufficient to induce profound slumber. All of these theories have been shown insufficient to explain the facts. We shall never arrive at a satisfactory theory of sleep, doubtless, until we admit the presence of a vital force and the existence of an individual human spirit, which withdraws more or less completely from the body during the hours of sleep, and derives spiritual invigoration and nourishment during its sojourn in the spiritual world. We shall speak of this more fully presently. The 7 common dreams. For the present we must explain, to begin with, the common types of dreams, and show how they are to be accounted for. There are 7 types of dreams, which, it is said, everybody experiences at one time or another in his life. These are: 1. The falling dream. 2. The flying dream. 3. The dream of inadequate clothing. 4. The dream of not being able to get away from some beast or injurious person or thing that is pursuing. 5. The dream of being drawn irresistibly to some dangerous place. 6. The dream that some darling wish has been gratified. 7. The dream of being about to go on a journey and being unable to get your things into your trunk, etc. Some of these dreams are to be explained in one way, some in another. But broadly speaking, it may be said that all ordinary dreams, such as the above, or others of a like type, are due to one of 3 causes: 1. Physical stimuli. 2. Subconscious mental association. 3. Subconscious imagination. In addition to this subconscious field there is also another, the superconscious, of which we shall speak later, but as this is not recognized by orthodox psychologists of today, we shall not discuss it for the present. Causes of dreams. Physical stimuli give rise to dreams in this way. The dream of inadequate clothing, for example, is doubtless produced by chilling the surface of the body, this in turn usually being due to the bedclothes falling off onto the floor. The dream of falling is probably due to the fact that by lying too long in one position, the blood supply is cut off, causing loss of sensation in the under part of the body, this in turn giving rise to the idea that we are not supported, consequently that we are flying or falling, etc. If a book is dropped, this may be symbolized as the report of a pistol in a duel, etc. Association causes many dreams in the following way. One idea or object of the mind brings up another connected with it, more or less directly, as it would be in life, and the whole storehouse of the subconscious mind is drawn upon in these associations, so that dreams are far more varied than our conscious associations. In addition to this, the third factor, namely imagination, is greatly enlarged and given free play, for the reason that the conscious, logical mind is dormant to a great extent, and hence the wild flights of imagination, which we take in sleep, are possible. The interpretation of dreams. It is because of these facts that nothing appears absurd to us while we are dreaming. No matter how ridiculous a situation may be, it never seems so to us until we are awake and able to reason over it. The curious medley of thoughts composing most dreams presents a striking resemblance to the ravings of delirium and insanity, and various medical authors have written books, aiming to show the close similarity between dreams and such insane wanderings. It has been shown of late years that almost all dreams, however illogical they may appear, are in reality more or less consistent, and that a logical strain or undercurrent may be found running through them, if they are analyzed and examined carefully enough. The celebrated Dr. Freud of Vienna has worked out an elaborate system of dream interpretation, based on his exploration of the subconscious mind, and those who may be interested may consult his recent work on dreams. He traces most dreams to early childhood impressions, and believes that they express, as a rule, suppressed wishes which have slumbered in the subconscious mind of the dreamer and are externalized in this form. Dreams have, in fact, been compared to the bubbles which break upon the surface of a pond of water. In both cases they have risen upwards through the lower strata, and we see the finished product only. What gave rise to this? This is a subject for further investigation. How to analyze dreams. If you wish to ascertain the causes of certain dreams, you may often do so in the following manner. Place your subject, who wishes his dream analyzed, in a comfortable chair, seated in a quiet room in semi-darkness. Set going a metronome, or ask him to listen to the tick of a large clock. While doing this, certain images and impressions will arise before his mind. Ask him to tell you what these are. As soon as he has done so, question him as to the origin of these, etc., and by continued questioning, going deeper all the time into his mind, you will ultimately find out the origin of his dream. An example will prove this. A lady of our acquaintance went into hysterics every time she smelled plum pudding. She could not account for this. One night she had a dream in which she saw herself cooking pudding in the kitchen, and woke up in a great state of fear and excitement. Analysis of this dream showed that when she was a little girl she had been left alone in the kitchen while pudding was cooking, and that the pudding had burnt and nearly set the house on fire. She saw herself running from the kitchen and screaming. As soon as this was discovered, she no longer experienced any fear or unpleasant sensations while smelling any kind of pudding. She was, in fact, completely cured. The subconscious fear had been removed and its evil effects ceased. Many similar fears, which terrorize our dreams and cause nightmare, could be shown to be due to these early childish impressions, were we to analyze carefully enough such dreams. The symbolism of dreams. The main characteristic of nearly all dreams is their symbolism. Of all our experiences, dreams are doubtless the most symbolic. They represent certain wishes, desires, emotions, thoughts, etc., which fill the subconscious mind, and which become associated together, forming what are known as complexes. These thoughts, as they become externalized, are presented in symbolic form. Thus, a snake may be a symbol of fear and hatred, an angel may be a symbol of love, a key may be a symbol of success, etc. Seeing and hearing dreams. Few people see colors in dreams. The shadows and figures which make up nearly all dream images are colorless or are of the consistence of light smoke. Just why this should be so, we do not exactly know, but some artists, who deal a great deal in color, experience dreams in which all the characters are clothed in gorgeous and highly colored robes. This, however, is the exception, not the rule. Again, why do we all see figures, scenes, etc., in our dreams? We very seldom hear either music or spoken conversation. Words are more rare than pictures. The reason for this is probably that we use our eyes more continually and more consciously than we do our ears, and for this reason the visual images are more easily expressed than the auditory symbols. Smell, taste, and touch are even more rare factors in dreams than hearing. Many persons experience peculiar visions while falling to sleep. They see hundreds of tiny faces before them in the dark, which may condense into one, and this becomes larger and finally vanishes, etc. These are well understood and need cause no fear or anxiety. Persistent dream images. On the other hand, dream pictures or images may continue for some moments after awakening, and these are called persistent dream images. Thus Dr. Abercrombie mentions an instance of a medical friend of his, who, having sat up late one evening, fell asleep in his chair, and had a frightful dream in which the prominent figure was an immense baboon. He awoke with the fright, got up instantly, and walked to a table which was in the middle of the room. He was then awake and quite conscious of the articles around him, but close to the wall of the apartment he distinctly saw the baboon, making the same grimaces which he had seen in his dream, and the picture continued visible for about half a minute. This is a good case of persistent dream image. What is somnambulism? Occasionally the muscular system becomes active during sleep instead of the senses only, and then we have cases of somnambulism, in which the patient walks and talks in his sleep, etc., and even does consecutive mental work. This shows a too active condition of his subconscious mind, which should be checked by proper treatment. It is extremely dangerous to wake anyone suddenly in the middle of an access of somnambulism. If the patient talks in his sleep, it may be very interesting, at times, to converse with him in a low tone and see whether or not he will reply intelligently. Many cases are on record in which valuable information has been obtained in this way, not only about the subject, but about distant scenes and even about his spirit friends. It is possible also to cultivate automatic writing with a good somnambulist, and in one case known to us, the patient went to bed with a planchette board tied to her hand, the pencil resting on a large sheet of paper, and when she awoke in the morning, it was covered with interesting messages. This is an experiment which the enthusiastic student would do well to repeat. I must now speak of superconscious dreams, in which we are brought into contact with a higher plane of life and activity in the same way that we are in contact with a lower plane during many of our ordinary dreams. When this happens, we experience so-called supernormal dreams, of which the following are types. Supernormal dreams. 1. The telepathic dream, in which telepathy occurs during sleep between a distant living mind and the sleeping mind of the subject. Information is thereby imparted which the sleeper could not possibly have known. For instance, in one case the sleeper's brother appeared to him and notified him of his own recent accident, which proved to be true. In another case the sleeper dreamed that a friend of his told him something which also proved to be true, etc. These are so-called telepathic dreams. 2. Clairvoyant dreams, in which the subject sees distant scenes and his vision subsequently proves to be true. In such cases the dreamer apparently leaves his body and travels to the locality in question. 3. Premonitory dreams, in which a vision of the future is obtained. In a few days, weeks, or months, as the case may be, this dream vision is fulfilled to the letter. 4. Spirit communication during dreams, in which a discarnate spirit apparently appears and gives a message to the sleeper, either of consolation or perhaps tells him an important item of news which he should know. In cases of this character we border very closely upon the medium trance and true mediumship. In rare cases communication has apparently been established in this manner. Experimentally induced dreams. It is possible to induce telepathic dreams experimentally in another, and you will find it most interesting to endeavor to do this, or to serve as the subject for others who endeavor to induce certain dreams in you during your sleeping hours. In such cases the sleeper has only to describe as carefully as possible his dreams on awakening. Those who endeavor to impress the dreams upon him must picture in their minds a clearly formed series of images, allowing these to float before them in space, endeavoring to impress each one in turn upon the sleeper by the power of will. After a little practice these experiments will often be found to succeed. It is possible to control our own dreams to a certain extent if we desire to do so. Thus, on falling to sleep, you may will that you experience dreams of a certain character, and if you set about it rightly, you can obtain these in many instances. Help is frequently given in this way. I know of several cases in which a subject has fallen to sleep after mentally suggesting to herself that she would receive enlightenment, help, and counsel through her dreams concerning the difficult problems of her daily life. In practically every case this was given, though often in somewhat symbolic form. If this were cultivated, it would prove a useful adjunct to our daily lives. Remembering dreams. Another good experiment which the interested pupil should make would be to endeavor to catch himself falling asleep. that is, to analyze the gradual loss of consciousness in his own person which occurs as he is falling into sleep. Some people can catch themselves in this way and others cannot. Those who are wide awake one minute and asleep the next will probably never make first-class mediums. Those who linger in the borderland the longest are those who are naturally most psychic. Another test is that of remembering dreams. If you can remember clearly a large percentage of your dreams, you are probably quite psychic. On the other hand, if you remember nothing that has occurred during sleep, you are more or less matter-of-fact, and unless you are the exception, probably will not attain any very great development along psychic lines. It is unwise, however, to cultivate to too great an extent this habit of remembering your dreams. If you do, you will thin the wall which separates your dream life from your waking life, and if this becomes perforated, trouble may result. Keep the two distinct, therefore, after your first initial experiments at introspection and dream analysis. End of Chapter 15. Dreams.
Chapter 16 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them by Hereward Carrington. Chapter 16. Automatic Writing. Automatic writing means writing which is performed without the use of the conscious mind, that is, writing which is performed by the unconscious muscular energies of the hand and arm, hence automatic or non-conscious writing. A pencil is taken in the ordinary way and held over a piece of paper, and in a short time it will be noticed that slight movements of the pencil occur, making scrawling marks on the paper. As time goes on, these marks become more and more consistent and consecutive. They begin to form circles, hooks, etc., until letters, then words, and finally whole sentences are written out. How to obtain automatic writing. The best way to obtain automatic writing is to hold the arm clear of the table, that is, so that neither the wrist, nor the elbows, nor any part of the arm, touches it. In this way, a certain amount of fatigue is soon induced in the arm, and as soon as this occurs, automatic writing tends to begin. In obtaining writing of this character, you must be careful to abstract your conscious guidance from the hand as much as possible, leaving it to itself. Do not try and write anything of your own volition. Let it guide itself, even if it writes nonsense at first. Some persons obtain writing more easily if the pencil be placed between the first and second fingers, but whatever way is most convenient to you should be adopted in cultivating automatic writing. Make the mind as blank as possible. After a time you may be able to think of other things at the same time, carry on a train of conversation, read a book, etc., at the same time that your hand is writing the messages, but it is improbable that you will be able to do this at first. The chief thing is to make the mind blank and await results. 2 important rules to follow. When developing automatic writing, you should sit for not longer than 15 or 20 minutes daily, and if possible, always at the same time. It is very important that these 2 rules be observed, for 2 reasons. In the first place, your spirit friends, who are, we are told, trying to help you in your writing, would come to assist you at certain stated times more easily than irregularly, especially if you told them exactly at what time to come. It is a good plan to say aloud, just when you have finished the writing, "Goodbye, tomorrow at the same time we will sit again for the messages." In the second place, the time should be limited. When you obtain writing of this character, you are apt to get so interested in the results, when once messages begin to come, and so curious in seeing what your hand says, that you will lose all account of time, and if you have nothing urgent to do, are liable to run on hour after hour writing automatically and replying to the messages you receive. If you do this for any length of time, you will break down the wall of defense, which normally exists against outside influences, and of the importance of which I have spoken so often in the preceding chapters. Mr. W. T. Stead, the well-known journalist and spiritualist, once stated that he considered these 2 warnings of the utmost importance, and attributed his own success, and the fact that he had never encountered any difficulties or any trouble in his automatic writing, to the fact that he had heeded strictly this advice. How automatic writing is accomplished. Automatic writing is doubtless performed by the subconscious muscular action on the part of the hand and arm of the writer, that is, in the majority of cases, but this does not serve to explain it, as many people believe. Granting that the actual writing is obtained in this way, the question remains, how about the information which is often obtained by means of the writing? Information which the writer could not possibly have known by any normal means. For instance, suppose you are sitting at your table, pencil in hand, waiting to see what is written. Your hand writes, "I am James Valentine. I was killed in a railroad accident this afternoon at 4 o'clock." Granting that your own hand actually moved the pencil to write this message, where did this piece of information come from? How did your mind know what to write, and the fact that James Valentine had been killed? That is the question which remains to be solved, and is the one which the majority of scientists who have undertaken to investigate and explain these phenomena slur over and leave altogether unexplained. In many other cases, also, the power seems to be greater than the medium alone could have produced, and in such cases an outside power was doubtless employed, as in many physical phenomena. The character of the messages received. Many of the messages you receive, especially at first, will doubtless prove incoherent and disconnected, like dreams. In fact, they are dreams, only instead of seeing these thoughts and visions, they are written out by your own hand. In both cases, however, it is your dream consciousness, subconsciousness, which originates the message or the visions. In many cases, however, clear and consistent messages are written, and these may be supernormal and show evidence of telepathy, clairvoyance, premonition, or spirit communication, just as dreams do. Many mediums obtain their messages direct by automatic writing. Mrs. Piper of Boston, in many ways the most famous medium in the history of psychics, obtained nearly all her communications in this manner. In her case, she passes into very deep trance while writing, and has to be supported by cushions. In your own case, it is improbable that you will go into trance at first, though you may have a tendency to do so, and if you begin to feel sleepy or drowsy during the writing, you should give way to this, and allow yourself to pass into the trance condition. In this state, many of the best messages are obtained. It is advisable, however, to do this for the first few times only in the presence of an experienced medium or psychic, who can attend to you during the period of trance, and who will ask questions for your hand to reply to, etc. Phenomena which may occur during the writing. This feeling of drowsiness appears very often in automatic writing, but it is not universal. Many mediums who obtain remarkable messages in this manner have never passed into trance, and have no desire to do so. They remain perfectly normal throughout. It may be that when you begin to write, your hand and arm will show signs of insensibility. That is, it will lose its sensation and any feeling of pain, etc. It becomes, as we say, anesthetic. You may be quite unconscious of this fact, and only discover it by accident. A good plan is to have a friend test it for you. When you are obtaining automatic writing, close your eyes and turn your head away, then ask your friend to prick you very lightly with a needle in various parts of your hands and arms, and see whether you experience any pain. It is quite possible that you will not do so, even if the pricks are severe. It is curious to note, however, that these pricks are noticed by the subconscious mind, for it often happens that the hand will write automatically, "You are hurting me," or "You pricked me in the third finger joint," or something of the kind, while you yourself might remain totally ignorant of the fact, so far as any consciousness of it was concerned. It is important for you to remember that automatic messages, like all messages of a like character, must be judged and accepted for what they are worth. More phenomena. Some of these messages are very remarkable, and contain sound advice which can be followed with profit. Some apparently originate from those spirit friends who claim to give them. On the other hand, many of them are foolish, lying, or merely silly, so that here, as in all other cases, discrimination must be used, and you must exert your own common sense and judgment in the matter of accepting these messages, and you must see to what extent you may be willing to abide and profit by the advice given. It sometimes happens that automatic writing forms letters, but these appear curiously shaped, and the words cannot be read. Sometimes it begins at the right hand side of the page, and writes toward the left, like Hebrew. When this is the case, it is always a good plan to hold the sheet of paper up to a mirror to see whether the writing can be read in this way. If so, the writing has been merely reversed, and is what we term mirror writing. Some persons can write with the left hand as well as with the right, but usually this is not the case, except with left-handed persons. The reason seems to be that the left hand is poorly developed as a writing machine. For this reason, we can hardly expect any intelligence who may desire to give messages, to find this an easy way of expressing them. Still, it may be tried after writing has been obtained by the right hand. Occasionally messages are given in foreign languages or in queer tongues, unknown to the sitter. These may be genuine messages, and if they come in a language unknown to you, you may be more or less assured that they emanate from some spirit friend who speaks the language in question. Occasionally, however, your hand will write gibberish, and there are many cases on record where this has been done and no true language has been written. How to develop the power. It is a good plan to sit in a semi-darkened room while obtaining automatic writing, in a comfortable position, and with the mind as free from care and preoccupation as possible. Automatic writing may, however, be obtained in a light room, if desired. Telepathic experiments may be tried in this manner. A friend of yours may try to impress upon you certain words, cards, figures, etc., which your hand writes automatically. The writing, you must remember, is only another method for the subconscious to express itself to the conscious mind, and happens to be a motor channel rather than a sensory channel. If it were the latter, you would see or hear the message instead of writing it. In both cases, however, the phenomena represent mere emergence. It is not necessary to write automatically with a pencil, for a planchette board, Ouija board, or some other apparatus may be used for this purpose. Indeed, this is a much simpler method to begin with, and writing is obtained more easily than by the pencil alone. Most people find it more satisfactory, however, to discard these instruments later on and employ the pencil direct. The above rules should enable the student to obtain automatic writing in a comparatively short time. Patience is required here as elsewhere. Hold the mind in a receptive attitude, send out a mental call for guidance and wisdom, and do not come to the conclusion too quickly that the messages you receive are nonsense. Often a jumble of letters that, at first sight, mean nothing, may form a very significant message when rightly interpreted. End of Chapter 16. Chapter 17 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them by Hereward Carrington. Chapter 17. Crystal Gazing and Shell Hearing. Crystal gazing means, simply, the practice of looking into a ball of crystal, glass, or some similar substance, and endeavoring to see within it pictures or images which apparently present themselves to the eye while thus gazing at it. Crystal gazing is very ancient. The Egyptians used it in their practices of divination, and throughout ancient history we find traces of this magical art. In the Middle Ages it was revived, especially by the learned Dr. Dee, who lived in the reign of Queen Elizabeth in England, and who employed a seer, or scryer, by the name of Kelly. Dr. Dee wrote a book on his researches, which work is now classical. In more recent times, crystal gazing has been made a subject of special study by the Psychical Research Society, and several books may now be had upon the question. It is a very simple, and at the same time, one of the safest means of psychic development. It is not necessary, as a matter of fact, to employ a crystal, or even a glass ball, particularly if you are a good subject, but it would greatly help matters if you did possess one, and we should advise the student to procure one, if possible, and use this for purposes of experimentation. How to begin. The best way to begin is to procure a crystal of at least 3 inches in diameter, larger if possible, and mount it upon a slender wooden stand. The stand and crystal should be placed against a background of black felt or cloth, and the crystal should be shaded with more cloth of the same character, so that there is no highlight anywhere upon it, that is, no point upon which the sun's rays fall, making it a bright spot. If the outlines of the ball appear a little cloudy and uncertain, owing to the semi-darkness, this will often help matters. Place yourself in front of the ball, your eyes being about a foot from its surface. You should be seated in a comfortable chair, your eyes shaded from the light, and relaxed in body and quiet in mind. Gaze steadily at the crystal for a few minutes. Do not strain or focus the eyes particularly upon any part of the ball, or try to see into its interior. Do not blink the eyes more than you can help. At the same time, do not strain them by trying to keep them open for any length of time without blinking. Do not let your eyes wander from the ball, nor your attention relax from the subject in hand. Do not let your eyes stare vacantly, but look intently at the ball without undue strain or concentration. Try not to think of anything in particular during the process of this gazing. Make the mind fairly blank. At the same time, Do not allow yourself to become sleepy or the mind to become totally blank to outside impressions. It is inadvisable to keep this up for more than 5 minutes at a time at first, for if you do you will find that your eyes will become strained and will water after you leave off the experiment. If this is the case, you may be sure you have continued gazing for too long a period. As in automatic writing, it is advisable, if possible, to sit at the same time every day while developing, and for the same length of time each day. This time may be lengthened as you progress, though it is usually found unnecessary to look into the crystal for more than a few minutes at a time, for you cannot get consistent, long drawn-out visions as you can automatic writing. Explanation of crystal gazing. Crystal gazing depends largely upon the ability possessed by the psychic to visualize or express in pictorial form thoughts and images which arise from the subconscious mind. The majority of crystal visions are of this character. You must not assume that because you see figures in the ball that these figures are really in that place, that is, that they are objective or external and exist within the crystal. No, they are mental pictures or hallucinations, but they are expressed or externalized in this way. For example, you may think of a friend's face and bring it up vividly before your mind's eye as a memory picture. Now, in ordinary life, the process of externalization ends there, but if you are a good visualizer, you can carry it further and actually project into the crystal the picture of your thought, placing it in the ball, where you will see your friend's face clearly reflected from within its depths. But your friend is not really in the ball. It is merely your mental conception or picture of him. Nearly all crystal visions are of this character, as before said. Supernormal crystal visions. Crystal visions, however, often contain information and messages which the sitter could not possibly have known normally, and which are conveyed to him by this means. For instance, you may look into the ball one day and see, acted before you in the crystal vision, a tragedy in which some friend of yours plays a part. You know nothing whatever about this, yet later on you receive from this friend a letter, telling you of the details of the tragedy in question. Your vision has proved correct. It is authentic and supernormal in character. Thus you will see that crystal visions are more than mere empty visions or hallucinations. The character and content of these pictures often convey striking information, and they may be telepathic, clairvoyant, or premonitory, just as dreams are. Or they may represent genuine spirit messages conveyed from some deceased friend or relative. It is no unknown thing to see words written in the ball as though you were reading handwriting. A friend of mine once looked into her crystal ball and saw within it a newspaper notice of the death of her dearest friend. She was totally ignorant of the fact, and only learned it later on. This same lady, who is a writer, has the power of projecting or placing in the crystal, at will, figures or scenes which she conjures up before her, and when they are in the ball, they will continue acting out the parts assigned to them, just as they would in a dream, for the figures seen in the crystal are not inert and motionless, but move about and appear to have life and motion of their own. On many occasions when this lady placed the characters of a novel she was writing into the crystal by an effort of will, she was enabled to see them there, and they frequently enacted certain scenes which gave her a good idea for the continuation of the plot of the story. In such a case, you will see, crystal gazing performed a very useful and practical service. How to develop the power. You may develop the power of visualizing in yourself, which is extremely important, by such simple imagination exercises as the following. Ask yourself a question such as, what was the color of Mother Hubbard's dog? Was Jack the Giant Killer dark or fair? Was Helen of Troy tall, or small and slender? Such questions as these should bring up before your mind's eye an immediate answer in the form of a mental picture of the person or event in question, and if they do not do so, you may be sure that your power of visualizing is not good and will have to be developed before you can have clear crystal visions. If your power of visualizing is extremely good, you will probably be enabled, after a certain length of time, to dispense with the ball altogether, and see your visions upon a white or black background by concentrating upon it, and finally anywhere in space that you may choose to induce them. When you have arrived at this stage of development, however, you are very far along the path of successful mediumship. Clouding and visualization. If you are to obtain crystal visions, you will probably notice that, Just before the vision appears, the ball will cloud over as though a blackish gray mist were filling it, or were interposed between your eyes and it. This clouding, as it is called, is well known, and is a symptom of oncoming visions. If after sitting for 5 minutes every day for a couple of weeks, you do not obtain any visions at all, you may rest assured that you are a very poor visualizer, and will probably not succeed in this direction. You might try, however, one simple experiment for a few days longer. Gaze at a bright and highly colored object, upon which the light is falling, for about a minute. Then close your eyes for a few seconds, and then look at the ball. If you are ever to see anything, you should, after a few attempts, see within the ball a duplicate of the object you have been looking at, in its complementary colors. It is asserted by a certain school of occultists that the visions seen within the crystal are not invariably subjective or hallucinatory, but are real entities, and that the figures have an independent existence apart from the seer. This, however, is a complicated question which is unsuitable for a primary book of instruction upon psychic development, such as the present. It will therefore be omitted from consideration with this brief mention. Shell hearing. If you place to your ear 2 large conch shells, you will hear a peculiar rushing or roaring sound as of the sea in the far distance. This is only natural, and probably due to the air within its cavities and the resounding properties of the various curves of the shell. So far all is simple enough, but many persons, who are slightly psychic, as soon as they place the shells to their ears, hear distinct and characteristic sounds, usually in the form of whispered or spoken words. These words may be inarticulate. They may be incoherent like dreams. They may repeat your own name time after time, or they may convey systematic and definite messages. As in the case of crystal gazing, dreams, and automatic writing, shell hearing is a method of externalizing, or expressing in outward form, the thoughts and auditory messages of the subconscious mind. But they may be more than this. They may at times embody telepathic, clairvoyant, or premonitory messages, or they may represent genuine spirit communication. It all depends on the content of the message, and upon the character of the words spoken, just as in planchette writing. If you obtain a jumble of nonsense, you may be sure that it is the product of your own subconscious activity, but if you obtain a characteristic and direct message, you may have reason to believe it emanates from the friend it purports to proceed from. In shell hearing, it is the same. Important warnings and advice. If the messages are nonsensical, they should be disregarded. If, on the other hand, they are interesting, clear-cut, and are proved to be correct, you should regard them as possibly genuine mediumistic messages, and they should be judged and valued by you accordingly. In all cases of this character, here as elsewhere, you must use your own critical judgment and common sense upon the messages you receive. Shell hearing is certainly one of the clearest, at the same time one of the most pleasant methods of receiving communications that can be employed. The voices which you hear may be recognizable or unrecognizable. It is the former that are a good proof of authenticity. They may develop by themselves, or emerge from a confused babel of sound. Unrecognized voices will often utter warnings, or convey information of this character. Human voices are not always heard in the shell, but occasional musical and other sounds, which cannot easily be described. Finally, an important warning should be heeded. If after discontinuing shell hearing you continue to hear voices, you should immediately drop all experiments for some days, as this phenomenon of insistent voices is one of the first symptoms of danger. As long as the manifestations are well controlled, you may feel that you are on the safe road and developing as you should, but if they begin to get beyond your control, you should stop shell hearing for some time, until you have strengthened your inner self to such an extent that you think it advisable to continue experimenting again in this direction. End of chapter 17.